Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at 7.1, adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomials. So I think a lot of this is going to be a refresher, but in case you'd like a refresher, let's go over it. So when you're looking at polynomials, you really got to look at how they're connected. So when I look at the first one, there's a plus sign in between, so I know I am adding. When you add, you combine like terms. So I usually go from biggest exponent to smallest. So it says in the instructions, write your solutions in standard form. So we always want to go biggest exponent to smallest. So I see my biggest exponent is an x squared, and over here I've got another x squared, and we're adding them. There's an invisible 1 here. So when we add them, we get 7x squared. When you add, exponents don't change, so they stay the same. The next would be x. So we've got an x, there's an invisible 1 and negative 1 in front of that. So we've got negative 1 plus negative 2 is negative 3x. And then we've got 3 and negative 7. So 3 plus negative 7 is negative 4. So we've combined like terms, and it's in standard forms, biggest exponent to smallest. So that's all we need to do. The next one, same idea. I see plus signs. So an addition sign and addition sign. So I am just combining like terms, going from biggest exponent to smallest. So that whole thing, the biggest exponent I see is a cubed. And I see another one here. Those are the only two. So negative 8 plus negative 3 is negative 11x cubed. If it helps, you can cross them off as you go, especially when they're big like that. Then we've got a negative 9x squared, an 8x squared, and a 4x squared. So notice I found the next biggest exponent. So negative 9 plus 8 plus 4 is going to give me a positive 3x squared. And then if it helps you to cross them off, you can do that. The next biggest would be an x. So there's a 1x, a negative 2x. So when we add those, we get a negative 1x, or just negative x. And finally, we have the constants. So 2 plus 4 plus negative 1 is going to give me a 5. So notice again, standard form, biggest exponent to smallest. And we have combined like terms. When we are subtracting, so subtracting, the way we practiced it, at least in my class last semester, was we did the invisible negative 1, and then we distributed it, and then rewrote it. So I think it's going to help us with the next lesson if we, instead of rewriting it, just kind of try to change the signs. So when you distribute that negative 1, it's going to turn this into, it's going to change all the signs. So this will turn into a negative 2, a negative 4, a positive 3, and a negative 1. And because we've distributed that negative 1, in the middle, it is now a plus sign. So after you distribute the negative 1, you change all the signs to where you're distributing, and then change this to a plus. And now we can combine like terms. So the biggest exponent is going to be the 3, so x negative 6x cubed and a negative 2x cubed. So we are adding those two negatives, so we get a negative 8x cubed. Then the next biggest exponent I see is the squared, and that's now a negative 4, so it'll be a minus 4x squared. So I've used all of these. Now we've got the x's, so 5x plus 3x is 8x. And negative 3 plus negative 1 is negative 4. So it saves us some writing to just distribute and then change the signs. If you prefer, though, you can always rewrite it after distributing the negative. So let's try it again like that. We've got this invisible negative 1. We are distributing it. And when we do that, we change the signs. So this becomes a positive 8, a positive 3, and a negative 4. And this becomes a plus sign. So now we can combine like terms. So the biggest exponent, we've got negative 8 plus 8. So negative 8 plus 8 is 0. So those just go away. 12x plus 3x would be 15x. And 6 plus negative 4 is 2. Okay, so adding and subtracting. Hopefully that looks pretty good. We've done that with imaginary numbers, so now we're just doing it with x's. Now when things are touching, we multiply. So a reminder, when you multiply, if you have exponents and it's like an x squared times an x cubed, we add those exponents, so it turns into an x to the 5th. So whenever you multiply x's, you're adding their exponents. So here, when I distribute, 4 times 3 is 12, and then there's an invisible 1 here, so I would add the exponents and it would become an x to the 3rd power. Then when I multiply here, I get a negative 8, And then the 2 doesn't have an x, so the x just stays the same. I can't simplify, so I'm done. And it's from biggest exponent to smallest, so standard form. Here we have a binomial times a binomial, so I'm going to do my double distributing. So x squared times 4x will give me 4x cubed, because there's that invisible 1. X squared times negative 1 is negative 1x squared, or just negative x squared. Then we have to distribute the 3, so 3 times 4x is 12x, and 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Nice, it's in standard form. We don't have any like terms to combine, so we are done. Finally, we've got a binomial times a trinomial. So here, we're going to distribute a lot. So each term has to be distributed to all the other terms in the other polynomial. So this 4x squared is going to get distributed here. So 24x to the 4th, so I'm adding those exponents. Then I distribute it to the next term. So plus 36x to the 3rd power, because there's that invisible 1. Then I distribute it to the last term. So minus 12x squared. Then I do the same thing with this negative 2, so it has to distribute. So negative 2 times 6 is negative 12x squared. Negative 2 times 9x is negative 18x. And negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. So this is nice, it's in standard form, but we have some like terms we need to combine. So these two I would want to combine, so we're just going to rewrite it one more time and combine like terms. So that'll be a negative 24x squared minus 18x plus 6. Finally, we've got a x minus 5 to the 3rd power. So we've mentioned it briefly this year. If you had something like x plus 1 squared, squaring means something happens like it times this by itself. So that would really be x plus 1 times x plus 1. So if I see it to the 3rd power, that means I have to do it 3 times. So it's going to be multiplied by itself 3 times. So that would look like x minus 5 times x minus 5, times another x minus 5. So when you have that many different like binomials being multiplied together, I would do this in steps. So first, I'm going to multiply these two together and ignore the last one. So I'll do x times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. I would simplify that, so I would combine my like terms. So x squared minus 10x plus 25. Okay, so that is the first two multiplied together. Then we're going to bring in this last term, or binomial, and we're going to put it at the end again. So we're going to have that x minus 5, because we haven't done anything with it yet. So now it's very similar to problem 7, where I'm going to have to distribute and multiply those two together. So we'll have x squared times x is x to the 3rd power. And then x squared has to distribute to the other term, so minus 5x squared. So now x squared is done. Now we've got to do the negative 10x times x, the negative 10x times negative 5, plus 50x. So now the 10x is done. Now we've got the 25, so 25 has to distribute here. Sorry, my handwriting is getting worse and worse. And then the 25 has to distribute here, which is a negative 125. Running out of room. Okay, so now we have done all the multiplying we need to, so we just got to combine like terms and make sure it's in standard form. So we can combine these two, we can combine these two. So let's rewrite it one last time. So this will look like x to the 3rd power minus 15x squared plus 75x minus 125. I don't know what I just wrote right there. Minus 125. There we go. Okay, so adding, subtracting, multiplying, you just have to look for what is the sign in the middle. If they're touching, it's multiplying. If there's an addition sign, add. If there's a subtraction sign, I would distribute it and then combine them together. And if you see an exponent, if it's to the 2nd power, you do 2 of them. If it's to the 3rd power, you do 3 of them. If it's to the 4th power, you do 4 of them. All right, good luck with the practice, and I hope it goes well.